My name is Alex, and I spend way too much time thinking about why our brains are absolute disasters when it comes to money. If you're someone who feels like you can never quite get ahead financially, like money just evaporates from your account no matter how much you earn, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Because today, we're going to completely rewire how you think about small amounts of money. And honestly, this might be the most important financial shift you ever make. Here's the thing. Most people will spend an hour comparing prices to save $200 on a new laptop. They'll check every review. They'll wait for the sale. They'll feel smart about getting that deal. But then those same people will walk into a car dealership and not even blink at a $200 difference in monthly payments. Suddenly, $200 doesn't feel like real money anymore. Same person, same $200. Completely different decision-making process. What the hell is going on here? And look, this isn't just some random observation. There's actual psychology behind this that's costing you thousands, possibly tens of thousands of dollars over your lifetime. Because here's what most people don't realize. The way you treat $200 when you're buying something small is completely different from how you treat it when you're buying something big. And that difference? That's what's keeping you broke. Let me show you what I mean. A study from the Journal of Consumer Research found that people consistently devalue the same amount of money depending on the context of the purchase. When $200 represents a significant percentage of the total cost, we treat it like it matters. But when $200 is a small percentage of a larger purchase, our brains basically round it down to zero. But here's where it gets really interesting. The researchers found that this is completely irrational. $200 is $200. It has the same purchasing power, whether you're saving it on a laptop or ignoring it on a car payment. But your brain doesn't see it that way. Let me give you a concrete example, because this is where people's brains just break. Scenario 1. You're buying a $600 TV. You find out the same TV is available for $400 at a store 20 minutes away. Do you drive there? Most people say yes, absolutely. That's a $200 savings. That's worth the drive. Scenario 2. You're buying a $30,000 car. You find out the same car is available for $29,800 at a dealership 20 minutes away. Do you drive there? Most people say no, it's only $200. Not worth the hassle. But here's the problem. $200 is still $200. The value of that money doesn't change based on what you're buying. The time it takes to drive there doesn't change. The effort doesn't change. The only thing that changed is your perception of the cost. And that perception is bankrupting you. Because if you make this psychological mistake just a few times a year, ignoring $200 here on a car payment, $150 there on furniture, $100 on a hotel upgrade, that's easily $1,000 to $2,000 per year. Over a decade, that's $20,000. And we're just talking about the times you consciously notice the difference. I haven't even touched the hundreds of small decisions where you don't even realize you're making this mistake. Now you might be thinking, okay, Alex, but what's the big deal? When I'm buying something expensive, I'm already spending so much. What's another $200? And look, that's exactly the trap. That's exactly the thinking that keeps people broke. Because here's what's actually happening. You're not evaluating money based on its actual value. You're evaluating it based on its percentage of the total cost. And that's destroying your financial future. There's this concept in behavioral economics called relative thinking, and it's one of the most expensive cognitive biases you'll ever have. Your brain doesn't see money as money. It sees money relative to something else. $200 feels huge relative to a $600 TV. But $200 feels tiny relative to a $30,000 car. A study by researchers at MIT and the University of Chicago found that people consistently make worse financial decisions on large purchases precisely because the relative value of money decreases. They found that for every 10 times increase in purchase price, people became approximately 50% less price sensitive to add-ons and extras. Think about that. When you're buying something 10 times more expensive, you suddenly care half as much about wasting money. That's insane. Let me tell you where this really hit home for me. A few years ago, I was consulting with this couple, let's call them Sarah and Mike. They came to me completely stressed about money. They felt like they were making good money, but could never get ahead. So we sat down and went through their spending. And here's what I found. Sarah had spent 3 weeks researching coffee makers to save $40 on a $150 purchase. She was proud of this. She felt financially responsible. But then, when they bought their house, they didn't negotiate on the closing costs. They paid $1,800 more than they needed to because, in their words, we were already spending so much. What's another couple thousand? $1,800. That's 45 coffee makers. That's the equivalent of Sarah's 3-week research project repeated 45 times. But because it was part of a $320,000 home purchase, their brains just didn't register it as real money. So I asked them, if someone offered to give you $1,800 right now, would you take it? They looked at me like I was crazy. Of course we would. So why did you just throw away $1,800 on your house? And they had no answer, because the only difference was context. The money felt less real. The percentage felt small. So they didn't fight for it. Here's where this gets really, really interesting, and honestly, kind of terrifying. Let's run some actual numbers. Let's say you fall into this psychological trap just 5 times over the course of your adult life. Maybe it's $200 you don't negotiate off a car payment. Maybe it's $300 you overpay on a couch because it's already expensive anyway. Maybe it's $500 in extended warranties and add-ons that you don't really need. Let's say over your lifetime, this relative thinking costs you $5,000 in unnecessary expenses that you could have avoided if you'd treated that money the same way you treat it with small purchases. But here's the thing, it's never just $5,000, because that's not accounting for the opportunity cost. If you had invested that $5,000 instead of wasting it, do you know what it would be worth? At an average annual return of 7% over 30 years, that $5,000 becomes $38,000. $38,000. From decisions where you thought $200 doesn't really matter in this context. And look, I'm not trying to tell you to be cheap. I'm not saying you should never spend money on things that make you happy. But I am saying that you need to evaluate money consistently. Because $200 has the same value whether you're buying a laptop or a car. The time it takes to save it is the same. The things you could do with it are the same. But here's what most people don't realize, and this is the part that I think is most important. This isn't really about the money. It's about decision-making. When you negotiate hard to save $200 on a laptop, you're being rational. You're thinking clearly. You're making a smart financial decision. But when you ignore $200 on a car purchase, you're not making a decision at all. You're letting your emotions and your cognitive biases make the decision for you. And those biases don't care about your financial future. The problem is that big purchases are exactly where this matters most. A $200 mistake on a laptop is annoying. A $200 monthly payment mistake on a car over 5 years? That's $12,000. Plus interest. You're talking about $15,000 for the same mental error. Here's another thing that makes this worse. Salespeople know about this bias. They exploit it constantly. Have you ever noticed that car dealerships always want to talk about monthly payments instead of total price? It's only $50 more per month sounds so much more reasonable than $3,000 more over the life of the loan. Have you ever noticed that furniture stores offer financing with small monthly payments? They're deliberately trying to make you think in relative terms instead of absolute terms. Have you ever been buying something expensive and the salesperson says, for just $200 more, you can upgrade to the premium version? They say, just $200, because they know your brain is already anchored to the larger purchase price. They know $200 feels small in that context. They are actively manipulating your relative thinking bias to extract more money from you. And it works. It works on almost everyone, almost every time. A study from the Harvard Business Review found that consumers spend an average of 30% more on add-ons and upgrades during large purchases compared to what they would spend on the same items purchased separately. 30%. That's not because the items are more valuable in that context. It's purely because of how your brain processes relative value. Okay, so what do we actually do about this? Because I can sit here and talk about psychology and cognitive biases all day, But if you don't have a practical system for fixing this, we're just wasting time. Here's what I want you to do. And this is going to feel weird at first, but I promise it works. Step 1. Use absolute thinking, not relative thinking. Whenever you're making a purchasing decision, train yourself to think about the actual dollar amount, not the percentage. Don't think $200 is only 5% of the car price. Think $200 is $200. What else could I do with $200? This is hard. Your brain doesn't want to do this, but you need to force it. Every single time you're about to ignore money because it's a small percentage of something bigger, stop and ask yourself, would I bend over to pick up this amount of cash if I saw it on the ground? If the answer is yes, then it matters. Fight for it. Step 2. Separate the purchase from the add-ons. Never evaluate add-ons, upgrades, or extras in the context of the larger purchase. When the salesperson says, for just $200 more, stop them. Say, I need to think about this separately. Then ask yourself, if I walked into a store right now and this upgrade was sitting on a shelf for $200, would I buy it? Not as part of a package, not as an add-on, just by itself. Would you spend $200 on it? If the answer is no, then don't buy it. The fact that you're already spending money doesn't change the value of the upgrade. Step 3. Use the time test. Here's a good rule. Spend the same amount of time trying to save money on big purchases as you would on small ones, adjusted for the dollar amount at stake. If you'd spend an hour to save $200 on a laptop, you should be willing to spend at least that much time negotiating $200 off a car. Actually, you should be willing to spend more time, because there's usually more money at stake with bigger purchases. Most people do the opposite. They spend hours researching small purchases and make big purchases impulsively. That's backwards. Big purchases deserve more attention, not less. Step 4. Calculate the true cost of small differences. Whenever someone quotes you a monthly payment, multiply it out. Always. Every single time. It's only $50 more per month doesn't sound like much, but $50 per month over 5 years is $3,000. Plus the interest you'll pay on that $3,000. You're talking about $4,000 or more. Would you pay $4,000 for whatever feature or upgrade they're selling? Probably not. But that's what you're doing when you accept $50 more per month. Make the invisible visible. Do the math. See the real number. Step 5. Set a minimum threshold. Decide right now. What's the minimum amount of money that matters to you? For most people, I'd recommend setting this at $50 or $100, then make a rule. Any financial decision involving more than that threshold gets the same level of attention and effort, regardless of context. Whether you're saving $100 on a phone case or $100 on a car, you treat it the same way. This removes the relative thinking trap. Money either meets your threshold or it doesn't. The context doesn't matter. Look, here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody wants to hear. The biggest financial mistakes most people make aren't the dramatic ones. They're not the person who buys a yacht they can't afford or gambles away their life savings. The biggest financial mistakes are the quiet ones. The $200 here and $300 there that you let slip away because you're already spending so much that it doesn't really matter. I've seen people spend 6 months researching which credit card has the best rewards program to save maybe $200 per year. And then those same people lose thousands on a car purchase because they didn't want to seem cheap in front of the salesperson. The difference isn't intelligence. It's not education. It's just psychology. It's your brain lying to you about the relative value of money. But here's why this matters beyond just your bank account. When you let relative thinking control your decisions, you're training yourself to be inconsistent. You're teaching your brain that your values and your standards change depending on the situation. And that doesn't just affect money. That affects everything. The same brain that thinks $200 doesn't matter on a car is the same brain that thinks one bad meal doesn't matter when I'm already off my diet, or one skipped workout doesn't matter because I've already missed 2 this week. It's a brain that uses context as an excuse to abandon standards. And that's a recipe for failure in every area of life. Because the same brain that thinks $200 doesn't matter on a car is the same brain that thinks one bad meal doesn't matter when I'm already off my diet, or one skipped workout doesn't matter, because I've already missed 2 this week. Success, financial, physical, professional, whatever, isn't built on being perfect in easy situations and sloppy in hard ones. It's built on having consistent standards that don't change based on context. It's built on treating $200 like $200, whether you're buying a phone or a house. So here's what I want you to take away from this. $200 is $200. Whether you're saving it on a laptop or ignoring it on a car payment, the value doesn't change. What changes is your perception. And if you let your perception drive your decisions, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering why you can't get ahead. But if you can train yourself to think in absolute terms, to evaluate money based on its actual value, not its relative value, then everything changes. You'll start catching yourself before you make expensive mistakes. You'll start seeing the patterns. And more importantly, you'll start feeling in control. Because you'll stop being a victim of your own psychology and start being someone who makes consistent, rational decisions regardless of context. The $200 you're about to ignore on your next big purchase, it's not small. It matters. It's real money that could be working for you instead of disappearing into someone else's pocket. And if this video helped you see money differently, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment letting me know what your biggest "it's only X dollars more" mistake has been. I read every single one, and honestly, some of these stories are wild. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.